It is January 12th, 2026, and all eyes are on Iran. But what is actually happening inside the country? And why isn't the mainstream media telling you about what happened in cities across Iran today, where millions of ordinary people took to the streets not to protest the government, but to rally against the violent riots, the foreign interference that they have seen in recent weeks? And while media here in the West are focusing on the fact that there is currently an internet blackout in Iran, we also have to ask the question, what happened as a result of that to these demonstrations that the US and Israel has been so vocal in their support of? Well, to answer all of those questions, we got into all of the latest with a special guest who is there on the ground and who was able to speak to us directly. So without further ado, let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Syed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at the University of Tehran. Professor Marandi, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you, Rachel. It's always a pleasure.
Always great to have you on the show. Now, I want to get your take on the latest there because I know that here in the West, everything the media is telling us is that there are these mass protests happening across Iran. They're not focusing really at all on the demonstrations we're seeing that are challenging the terrorism that has happened, the violent riots that have happened on the ground. So will you take us through kind of what is happening there in Tehran and what you've seen on the streets?
Yeah, you're right. What we saw today was phenomenal. It was huge. Across the country, there were rallies in support of the Constitution, against the riots, against the violence, against the terrorism, against the police killing. They've killed over 100 police officers or officers of the law in the last few days. The numbers are huge, and people, they can go and check Press TV, and they have footage of the rallies and all. And it's not like in Tehran, it's everywhere. It's in all the cities. And in Tehran, there was a huge rally. There's helicopter footage. A helicopter took it went from Azadi Square to Imam Hussein Square, which is they're very far apart, and the Engelov Square is between the two. So it was massive. I don't know if we've ever had a larger crowd in Iran, but it indicates how people feel, and it utterly dwarfs anything that the West has been trying to depict as some sort of popular uprising. What we saw, the real story was this, Rachel. The United States and its allies, they manipulated the currency 10 days ago and brought down the currency. I don't know. I never check the currency. I usually don't check the currency rate because I don't do business. But I think it went down like 30 or 40% in a very short period of time, in a few days. And shop owners, business people, they got worried because you buy goods, you sell them, and then you get a profit, and then suddenly the price goes up and you can't buy more goods. So they could go bankrupt. So they went to the streets and protested, and the police didn't do anything about it. The government said, your grievances are very legitimate and we're working on it. And that was it. And then on the second day, they also went to the streets again. Not in huge numbers, maybe a few thousand across the country. I don't know. I don't follow these things that closely. But they're peaceful. And then we had infiltration. And then suddenly we had these small teams across different cities and within big cities, in different parts of them, suddenly carrying out very violent acts, rioting, killing people, burning down buildings, burning tens of buses, public buses, tens of fire engines. They burned down clinics. They burned alive a woman nurse in a clinic. She escaped and went to the top floor. The whole building was burnt down. The whole clinic was burnt down. And this woman was trapped inside, a young nurse. They murdered someone from the Red Crescent. They murdered kids. They murdered. There's footage of them throwing Molotov cocktails at a mosque, and their little kids playing inside. I've tweeted that. These people are, and there's footage of some of them actually taking drugs. I'm not saying they all did, but there is footage of that. So you had these violent riots across the country, and then when the riots took place, the peaceful protesters left the scene, and the police got involved. When you're burning down buses, when you're burning down ambulances, when you're burning down when you're burning fire engines, when they're burning down buildings and banks, then the police are going to stop them. And they shot at the police. They beheaded police officers. They burnt police officers alive. They smashed their faces with stones. These people are like ISIS. And then the West calls them peaceful protesters, even though there's footage of what they did. And then all that aside, Rachel, Pompeo goes out and says that there is Mossad in a tweet. Pompeo was the former head of the CIA. He says the Mossad is with the protesters. Mossad itself gave out a Persian statement in their account saying that Mossad is on the ground. And the reason why it was so difficult for me to be on your show is because I don't have internet. They cut off internet throughout the country. As soon as they cut off the internet, the whole thing collapsed. Why? Because all these different groups, the Kurdish terrorists, the Komole terror organization, and others, the ISIS is also involved. The Mujahideen Khalq, a terror organization that fought for Saddam Hussein against their own country, they're involved. The monarchists, they're involved. All of them are coordinated. They've been working, and then as soon as they cut the internet off 2-3 days ago, the whole thing collapsed. The whole network collapsed. Why? Because the whole thing was being managed from abroad. And so, I mean, the evidence, the very fact that you have the Israelis and someone like Pompeo admitting all this, and Israelis on Israeli TV, which have been translated and put online by the Iranians, there's no need for Iran to prove anything. They've been saying it. They've been boasting about it. But the Western media is not going to acknowledge this, and they're not going to acknowledge what happened today in Tehran today. As I said, the rally was like anyone who knows Tehran knows what I'm talking about. This is huge. And they'll either not say anything in the West, or they'll say thousands or maybe tens of thousands. But what happened in Tehran was well over 1 million. Well over 1 million. God knows how big it was. And then you had simultaneous rallies across the country in every city. Huge. In Shiraz, in Karaj, which is close to Tehran, in Mashhad, in Tabriz, in Marand, in Mashhad, everywhere. So it wasn't as if people would come to Tehran to participate. Everyone had their own thing. And it's all been shown on Iranian television. People can see it. They can judge for themselves. All they have to do is go and look. So what does that say about the legitimacy of the state that is under maximum pressure sanctions, where there's a Persian media empire in the West that is attacking it day and night? I mean, they're spending billions of dollars on TV channels, on websites, on many TV channels, on websites, on Telegram channels, on armies of online foot soldiers. A few thousand of them are in Albania. They live there in the camp, and they work day and night, and they all have different accounts and bots and so on. Whereas on this side, many people don't have accounts. They've deleted my account on Instagram and Facebook years ago, and my Twitter account is heavily shadow banned. So despite all that, and despite the maximum pressure sanctions, and despite the unhappiness about the general situation for the economy, you have all these millions upon millions of people across the country coming to the streets to defend the Constitution, the leader, and condemn the terrorists and the monarchist terrorists and the Mujahideen Khalq terrorists and the ISIS terrorists and so on and so forth. What does that say about Iran, and what does that say about Western narratives on Iran? And I was saying this to someone earlier. Every 3-4 years, something happens in Iran, and the Western media says it's over, it's collapsing, the people are rising up, they hate the regime, it's evil, it's despised. And then I go on media and I say, no, that's not true. You're the mouthpiece of the dying regime. Once Farid Zakaria called me this 16 years ago, that I'm the mouthpiece of a dying regime. But okay, but when is it going to die?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
this process of dying is taking a long time. So, what does that say about their understanding of Iran and their calculations? It's all based on wishful thinking.
It's so interesting to me because we're watching this situation play out in Iran. It comes just over a week after the Trump administration sent the US military to invade the sovereign nation of Venezuela, right? They go in there, they kidnap the country's elected leader, and yet the Venezuelan government is still running. It's still operating. They just took the vice president. Now she's the interim president. So I look at Iran and I go, what does the US expect to happen here, right? Sure, if these protests continue, there's going to continue to be a response from law enforcement. The US would be doing and is in some ways doing a version of that here, although targeting much more peaceful protesters here. But in addition to that, they seem to have this vision for quote unquote regime change in Iran, yet I don't feel like the US fully understands the Iranian government. How do you see what the US and Israel are trying to achieve in Iran with this goal of forcing the civilians to be so miserable with all of these sanctions and with targeting their currency that they think that there is going to be enough public pressure and that the Iranians are just going to go, yeah, I think that we should have the US and Israel run the show for a change?
Yeah, I mean, it's really ridiculous. They target ordinary Iranians through sanctions. They try to make them suffer. They wage war against Iran, a 12-day blitzkrieg war attack on the country as Iran was negotiating. And then they speak as if they care about Iranians. And there's no difference in this uniparty in the United States. There's no difference between AOC or Trump. AOC just a few hours ago tweeted that we should help the Iranian people. What does that mean? It means war. It means devastating the country. Whereas it's the United States that's harming the Iranian people. It's through sanctions that they're trying to destroy the lives of the Iranian people. But Western media will never say that because Western media is not independent, because these are not democracies. The United States is not a democracy. I mean, a woman in the UK can go to jail for holding, an 85-year-old Jewish woman can go to jail for holding a placard saying, I oppose genocide. She'll go to jail in the UK. And then the protesters in Iran in day one, when they were peaceful, no one touched them. Or in the United States, this young woman, she's shot in the face. There's this huge debate about whether the car was moving away from the ICE officer or not. And yet we have footage of these people murdering police officers in Iran. Western media will pretend they're all peaceful. We have footage of them burning down buildings. We have footage of the clinic that was completely destroyed, a big clinic. We have footage of all this. This is all out there, but they pretend it doesn't exist. Why? Because the Western media is not independent. It's linked to the powers that be. What was the objective? It starts from the media. It starts from the currency manipulation. In my opinion, and in the opinion of many others, they wanted the currency to fall. They manipulated the situation so that people would be unhappy. Some would come to the streets and protest. And then these teams that have been trained, very well trained, the police are saying, we've never seen anything like this before. And by the way, when they disconnected the internet and this whole thing collapsed, it shows how elaborate the operation was. That you had sort of like generals sitting in, I don't know, in Washington or Tel Aviv or wherever. I don't mean actual generals, but I mean like the commanders of this whole operation, planning all of this, and the whole thing falls apart. But in any case, these people were violent and killing people, but no one talks about them. They'll talk about whether the car was moving towards this woman or not. But in Iran, these are all, why? Because they hate Iran. Why do they hate Iran? Rachel, it's very easy. It's very simple. They've hated Iran for decades because Iran is independent and because Iran supports Palestine. And Iran is the only country that will support the Palestinians and make sacrifices for it. It's the only country. No one makes sacrifices for Palestine. No one. No country in the world make. That's why Iran is sanctioned. That's why Yemen is battered. That's why Hezbollah is bombed. It's all because of Palestine. So they would like to see Iran crumble, crushed, destroyed, beaten because of the Israeli regime. Their hatred for Iran is I think, unprecedented, and their dislike for Russia or China or Venezuela, I think none of them compare to their hatred for Iran, and that's because of Zionism. So ultimately, I think that the currency manipulation and these people who are obviously very well trained from beforehand, this was all a part of a project to show Iran as unstable and some brutal, barbaric crackdown taking place. Forget the terrorism and all that, and the police killing. And that would justify war. That would justify military. The whole objective, starting from the currency manipulation, was to make the case for war. A war which the United States would not win, because Iran will strike and destroy everything in the region. And all these oil and gas facilities are right alongside Iran's borders in the Persian Gulf and the Caucasus. And in Iraq, Iran supporters they'll make their move. Everyone would lose. The global economy would go down. But these people are Israel firsters. They don't care about the US economy or European economies or the global economy. They care about the Israeli regime. So they are pushing for war. And this whole project, I think, is in order to justify that and nothing else really.
Yeah. Oh, I'm with you. As you're watching, the statements that we're getting, and even just the statements from, say, President Trump, right, where he comes out on social media and he declares that if Iran targets any quote unquote peaceful protesters, of course, there are no violent rioters in his mind, that the US will then intervene. But as I look at the US and Israel and I go, okay, you guys clearly were not prepared for the first phase of this war, right? You thought you had a plan, you clearly did not. Now you're here looking at a possible second phase of this war. Where do your concerns stand for the US and Israel jumping the gun again and launching another attack, even with all of the warnings that Iran has issued?
I don't know what is going to happen, but the very fact that the many millions of people who are on the streets today in Iran, their images of these pro-constitution, pro Ayatollah Khamenei, pro an anti-rioter, an anti-terrorist, an anti-Mossad, an anti-CIA protesters, the very fact that they're not going to be shown on Western media, or they're going to say at most a few thousands of Iranians participated. I mean, all people have to do is go and look at the footage, not in Tehran, in one of the cities. In, let's say, Esfahan, hundreds of thousands participated, or in Shiraz. I mean, they don't have to take my word for it. The footage is out there. They can go to Press TV or some other media channel. They're not going to show it because it destroys the narrative. And then what is the narrative? It is the same thing. It is what both AOC and Trump are saying. You have to help the Iranian people. They don't want to help the Iranian people. They don't care about the Iranian people. War is to destroy the Iranian people. That's the objective. But AOC is a part of the same club that Trump is. Now, whether AOC is the same problems with Epstein or some other Epstein or anything like that, I have no idea. But the issue is that these people are it's a uniparty. And the uniparty is controlled by Zionism and the neocons. And as long as this continues, you're not going to see peace anywhere, whether it's Venezuela or Iran or anywhere else, or in Ukraine or with China. In the case of Iran, it's particularly an issue because they support the Israeli regime. They support ethno-supremacism. They support the genocide. All of them do. I mean, AOC, she voted for the funding that went to the Israeli regime, and Trump gave that money to the regime. So did Biden. They're all the same. I mean, they may have differences over abortion, or taxation, but when it comes to the empire, they may have differences about what sort of turn the automobile took when the lady was, when the ICE office. But when it comes to Iran, they're all the same. When it comes to Venezuela, they're all the same. When it comes to all of these other issues, when it comes to slaughter in Gaza, they're all the same. They're not very different. Maybe someone like AOC may now and then say something because she has to. I mean, once upon a time, she was considered a progressive and an outsider, but not anymore.
Oh, I agree 100%. And you watch as these members of Congress in the US, they act as though they're on opposite sides of the aisle. And then every year they get together and they vote on the National Defense Authorization Act, which for 2026 is to the tune of nearly $1 trillion. And when I look at the situation in Iran, I know that we've been talking about this for months in the aftermath of the 12-day war. Iranians came together, right? It's not as if Iran was attacked by the US and Israel and the average people in the streets look at each other and they go, oh, okay, we're not going to support our government anymore. No, they knew who their enemies were. They knew that their country was under attack. And it feels as though the US and Israel, they think that they are going to make the Iranian people so miserable that they will then turn on their government. But when it comes to the position that the Iranian people are in, as they're watching these building tensions, as they're seeing the threats from the US and Israel, and knowing that their goal is to just destroy Iran as we know it, how do you see the position that the Iranian people are in and kind of what they're keeping in mind as they're handling all of this?
They're united. I think the protests today shows where the Iranian people stand. Can Macron muster such crowds? Can the British Prime Minister muster such crowds? Can Trump muster such crowds during economic siege? No. So there is a very high degree of legitimacy in Iran. They don't want to accept that because the whole notion of Iran not being a regime, but rather a legitimate state, destroys their narrative. And their whole narrative is there to undermine Iran, to justify aggression, to justify sanctions, to justify murder and war. And when the Israeli regime carried out the Blitzkrieg attack, the German chancellor said the Israelis are doing our dirty work for us. The Europeans supported it. The Americans, of course, were behind it. So, and I'm pretty sure that there are sane people, sinister but sane in in Western intelligence agencies that know where the Iranian people stand. But for them and their bosses, the issue is undermining Iran. So they'll have to create a narrative, no matter how false it is. As I said, all the time, I'm always being told Iran is on the verge of collapse. Iran is hated by its people. Okay, it's on the verge of collapse. We had a war. What happened? Did it collapse? It was a blitzkrieg attack. Did it collapse? No. It became stronger. Okay, you had riots. Again, like a few years ago, where the West was supporting riots. Now again, you have riots. We saw people go to the streets in Tehran. Is this going to break the narrative? No. The narrative is not going to change. They'll hide this or ignore it. They'll make some, they'll protect. And Rachel, other cities are equally important. You have, like, in Esfahan, as I said, in Ahvaz, in all these cities across in Yaz, in all smaller cities, in Qom, in towns, Kashan, in Kerman, all of these cities and many others, they had their own big rallies. All of that aside, in Tehran, this huge crowd that came, it's not easy for many of them to go. It took me an hour and a half to get there, a couple of hours to get back home. Very exhausting, but a lot of these people were there are people who are living under sanctions, and they're like workers. They are spending like half a day, and of course, probably money to move around, to get to this place and to make a stand and make a statement against terrorism and in support of the Constitution and the state. That's saying a lot. So these people who have to work day and night, to under sanctions, to keep their families secure and to feed the kids, they go and say, okay, I'm going to take part in this. And they go across the city, spend hours getting there, spend hours going back. That's saying a lot. And at a time when life is not easy and when the country is sanctioned and when people are not satisfied with the current administration, rightly or wrongly, right? The Pezeshkian administration, he was elected a year and a half ago, rightly or wrongly. The point is that they're not looking at the administration. They're not. Some of them on the street support the administration. Some are opposed. Some have other views, but all of them went there to support the state institutions, the Constitution, and to oppose foreign intervention and terrorism and murder and the murder of officers of the law and widespread damage and destruction and the involvement of Western intelligence agencies in our country. That is something that Western media is going to ignore. Why? Because it doesn't benefit the narrative for war. It doesn't benefit the narrative for delegitimizing Iran. And all of this delegitimization is to help the Israeli regime. They support the genocidal regime and they hate Iran because if Iran was like Turkey, if it was like Saudi Arabia or the Emirates or Egypt or Jordan, it wouldn't have any sanctions. It would not be called a regime. It would not be harassed and you would not have these. You don't hear people saying the Turkish regime. You don't hear people, the New York Times, saying the Saudi regime, the Jordanian regime, the Egyptian regime. Mm-hmm. It's only the Iranian regime or the Maduro regime. Why? Because Maduro wants an independent country. And so even in the West, when they want to criticize the war, they still use Western narratives. They'll say, Maduro is an evil man, true, but we shouldn't be doing this. No, you're evil for justifying, for strengthening the narrative that he's evil. If anyone's evil, it's the one that's carrying out the murders, the one who's bombing the boats, the person who's bombing I in Venezuela, I visited this scientific institute, this center that was bombed. I visited that place. They have like this mathematics building. I saw like most of the buildings. It has nothing to do with him. The Americans destroyed it. Maduro's not evil. Those people who carried out these attacks are evil. And those people who try to, they're apologetic. They say, oh, I oppose this, even though Maduro is evil, or even though the Iranians are evil. No, the ones who are evil are the ones who are carrying out the attacks, not the victims. It's none of their business who Maduro is. None of their business. It's the business of the people in that country. But again, so even those who oppose it in the mainstream media or in mainstream politics, they still justify the narrative. Because by delegitimizing states, by calling them regimes, they are preparing the ground for war. I was on, when the Israeli regime began its attack on Iran, I was on Piers Morgan's show. Mm-hmm. And he began, so Iran was negotiating, and then they carried out a blitzkrieg attack, the Americans and he brought me on the show, and like for 2 or 3 minutes, he just began this rant on Iran, how evil Iran is. They murder women, they slaughter, all sorts of nonsense. Why did he do that? To justify the war, to make the case for war. He's not going to say, I support the war, but he'll say, Iran is evil. And when Iran is evil, then the argument doesn't become that this attack is evil or not. It becomes whether it's the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. they're evil, but maybe we shouldn't deal with them this way. Maybe we should deal with them in a different way. I don't know if I'm making my point, but they're all complicit.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I think you make a great point there. And it reminds me of when I go and I read the reports in the West about what's happening in Iran, and they'll give you some figure, like they'll say over 500 protesters killed. And then I go, okay, where did they get that number? And then you read further and you see that they're quoting a US-based institute inside Iran. And then you read further and they quietly admit that, well, they can't really independently verify any of this. It's just a claim that they heard that they're now reporting, but it's also a claim that they heard that they are now putting in their headline. And I would love to see Piers Morgan on a trip to Iran. I think it would be a bit of an eye-opening experience for
Well, he
him.
told me he won't come. I invited him on his show twice, and he said, "No, you'll give me to the this is how insulting he is." He said, "You will hand me over to like the guards or something." Very childlike. These people who whether again it's AOC or Trump, they're all saying the same thing, and they're all a part of this apparatus that prepares the ground to carry out slaughter. They're no different from one another. It's if they're the bad guys, it's like the war in Iraq. If you recall, after the war, when it became clear that it was based on a lie, and we knew from the beginning it was a lie, but then they started saying it was a mistake. That's like Nazi Germany saying, yeah, well, World War II, it was a mistake. What do you mean a mistake? It's like the Gaza genocide, it was a mistake. No, it was a crime against humanity. It was mass murder. It was slaughter. It destroyed a nation. It destroyed the lives of millions. And if you notice, they're always talking about when they're against it, they say, we lost 4,000 soldiers. Like, well, like compared to the Iraqis who were killed, that's a very insignificant number. And those soldiers were killed as an occupation force. So, their whole moral compass is upside down. And these people can't comprehend that actually Iran is the moral side. They're the immoral side. Because they're supporting genocide and Iran is fighting against genocide. That's the fact of it. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Turkey, Jordan, all these regional countries are in the American camp. The Europeans, they're all in the American. Who's supporting the Palestinians? Iran. And the axis of resistance. That's the moral side. And by the way, this evil monster in Maduro, he supported the Palestinians. So when he supports the Palestinians and these Western journalists who call him evil, no, they're evil, not him. Because they are silent, or they look away, or they're apologetic for the Israeli regime, and they've been doing that throughout this genocide that's still ongoing. And he took a stand for the Palestinian people, and he paid a price. And so did the people of Venezuela. Why is Venezuela sanctioned like Iran? Because it wants to be independent, and because it takes a moral stance. So when it comes to moral hierarchy, I'm afraid to say, Western people aside, I know many people, especially young people, are completely opposed to the genocide and they stand up against it. Jews, Christians, Muslims, people from all walks of life. I get that. That's absolutely crazy, and they're heroes. But Western regimes, when it comes to moral hierarchy, they are at the absolute bottom.
Yeah, and their refusal to allow countries like Venezuela, like Iran, to be independent, their refusal to allow any sort of pushback, anyone to criticize an ongoing genocide, that should tell you all that you need to know. And I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to give us some insight into what is actually happening in Iran that you're not going to find in the mainstream media. Syed Mohammad Marandi, a professor at the University of Tehran, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also check out Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins.